this lesson, we're taking a look at the song Bad Guy by Billie Eilish. We're going to be looking at the bass line and the lead synth part and putting them both on guitar so you can play along to the original track, put them together yourself using a looper pedal, or better yet, jam along with another person who plays guitar as well. This lesson is part of Series 4 of my beginner guitar course, where we're adding more melodic elements to your guitar playing and trying to move away from just them basic chords, so you can find more songs and riffs like this one in the playlist in the description, and anything that you're unsure about in this lesson you can brush up on in the previous series of my beginner's course. We're going to start with the bass line, so let's dive in. So in terms of the sound for the bass line, I was using an octave pedal in the intro to change the pitch an octave lower, because obviously guitar is heard an octave higher than the bass. But if you don't have an octave pedal and you're just using clean guitar, that's fine, you can still play along. The most important thing is that you're learning and practicing the part, but if you want to get a little bit closer to the original sound, you can use an octave pedal to better mimic the bass. Now, if you've explored a little bit of music theory, it might help you to know that this song is in the key of G minor, and it's sort of using a 1-4-5 progression in that G minor key, but absolutely fine. If you haven't got into the theory, you can still learn the parts and play along absolutely fine. It is important to know though that it relies a lot on changing the lengths of notes and creating little gaps in between them to get the feel right. I call this musical punctuation, and I've done a video on that, so I'll pop a link in the video cards because you might want to check that out if you haven't already. So getting into the actual part, I'm going to break this into 3 sections, which correspond to the 3 chords being outlined by the bass. The first one is based around a G chord, so we're going to start with the 3rd finger playing the note G on the 3rd fret of the low E string, and we're going to play the note, sustain it for a little bit, and then leave a little gap. So following this, we're going to play the same note again, followed by 1st finger playing 1st fret on the A string, back to that 3rd finger on the note G, 3rd fret on the bottom string. So far we've got... We're then going to do 2 staccato notes on that G note, 3rd fret. Then the 3rd fret on the low E to the 1st fret on the B, back to the 3rd fret again. And then we're going to finish with the 1st finger playing the 1st fret on the low string. So if we put all that together, so only 3 different notes in this one. It's just getting the feel right that is the important thing and where all the groove comes from. That part is just repeated twice in the song, so if we put 2 of them together, that gives us our first section, which is based on the G chord. In the next section, we're going to be looking at a C chord based riff. So the 3rd finger is going to move up a string to the 3rd fret on the A string, which is the note C. And the start feels exactly the same. So we're kind of just taking that same shape that we played on the bottom string, but starting it on the A string now. So we've got 3rd fret A, leave the gap, same note again, 1st finger, 1st fret D, back to that 3rd finger on 3rd fret. So then the 2 staccato notes, then same note again, moving to 1st finger on D string, back to 3rd finger on A string. And here's where it differs from the G chord part, because the right hand's going to move up to the G string and play the open G, and that allows the left hand to come off and shift up to the next position. So by hitting that open string and letting it ring out, we just get a bit of leeway to move the left hand. So that would be the C chord part. So if we play the G and C chord parts back to back, we're going to have this. And you want to get into the habit of moving that hand up as soon as you hit that open G string, without actually letting the fingers in the left hand touch any of the strings and stop that ringing out. So now we're going to move up into this D chord part. So the 2nd finger is aiming for the note D, which is the 5th fret on the A string. We're going to play that note twice with a little gap in between. And this time we're going to use the 1st finger playing the 4th fret of the D string, back to the 2nd finger on the A string, and we're going to play that twice. Again, we're going to have a little gap and then finish it with just a staccato note at the end. So the D part is just going to be and then you leave the rest of that bar completely empty and go back to the G chord part at the start. Now the gap at the end of the whole part has to be exactly the right length, so you're starting on beat 1 on the next phrase. So if I play the whole thing through a couple of times, I'm also going to count beats 2, 3 and 4 after I've played the D chord part, so you can see exactly how it syncs up with the track. So from the start we're going to have 2, 3, 4. So hopefully you can see how that works in terms of the timing, putting the count in halfway through. You might have to count yourself as well the first few times you do it, but try and get out of the habit of counting and just feeling when that part should come back in, starting again from the G chord. And hopefully also you can see how to synchronize the movement of the hand up into the D chord position while that open G string's ringing out. So a little bit of a tricky one, but not too many notes in. It's mainly just a case of getting the groove right, but that is the bass line. So let's take a look at that synthy lead part now. It is a little bit tricky. There's a lot of notes and no gaps, so it feels a little bit relentless and quite quick, but it is also quite repetitive. So once you get the hang of each section, it's not too bad playing all the parts back to back. Like the bass line, I'm going to separate it into the 3 parts which match the 3 chords outlined by the bass. So we're going to start with the G chord part, and the first note is going to be the first finger playing the 12th fret on the G string. Following this, we're going to use the 3rd finger to play the 15th fret on the B string. So you want to make sure you've got your hand at a little bit of an angle to help those fingers stretch. If you have it too straight, the fingers are going to have to try and be pried apart like this, which isn't comfortable. You want to get them nice and angled so they're pointing a little bit more up the fretboard and making that stretch a little bit easier. We're going to play that 15th fret on the B string twice. So following this, first finger's going to play the 12th fret on the G string again. And then we've got this nice little riffy part where we're going to use 2nd finger to play the 14th fret B, 3rd finger to play the 15th fret B, back to 2nd finger, and then the 3rd finger is going to come over to the 15th fret G. So that little ending, and then if I put that in from the start, and then we just repeat that 4 times. So as I say, there's no gaps. You've got to keep playing each note one after the other. So you might want to start by practicing it quite slowly first, just until you really burn it into the muscle memory. So the next part we're going to look at is going to match the C chord. We're going to start with the first finger playing the 13th fret on the B string. Now the 3rd finger is going to play the 15th fret on the top string twice. So not as big of a gap on this one. Back to that first finger, 13th fret B. And then we've got the little chromatic part again. This time it's 2nd finger playing 14th fret high E, 3rd finger playing 15th fret high E, back to that 2nd finger on the 14th fret. So far. But then we have the stretch coming back for this last note because we need to get the 3rd finger over to play the 16th fret on the B string. So one round of the C chord part would be, and then it just repeats again. So if I play the C part in full, you would get, now from this point you want to move your 2nd finger onto the 15th fret B. This is going to start us off in a nice position to play the D chord part. Now it's going to be little finger playing 2 notes on the 17th fret on the high E, back to that 2nd finger on the 15th fret B, and then to finish it off we're going to have 1st finger playing the 14th fret high E, and then 2 notes on that 2nd finger still on the 15th fret B. So the D chord part Okay, so you have to practice the transition from moving into the C chord part to the D chord part, but if you use the fingers that I've explained, you should find it it's quite doable. So from the C chord part, transition to the second finger, get that little finger on, and then you've got the same gap before you're starting again on the G chord part. So if I play the whole thing through from the start, we'd have this. So because the whole thing is just eighth notes, it's all 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and there's no feel or groove elements that you've got to think about and try and master. It's just that relentless nature of playing notes constantly, not letting there be any gaps in the playing. So as I say, you might have to practice it slowly and speed it up. When you do your practice, try and practice without the gaps, otherwise you kind of just become better at playing with gaps in, whereas you want to be playing like smoothly and fluently. So that would be my advice for the practice. But that's the lead part, as I say, a little bit tricky, but a good challenge for this stage of your guitar playing. And now let's take a look at the picking as well. Now I'm probably going to say similar things to what I've said in other lessons in this series, but generally when it comes to beginners getting started on lead guitar, the instinct is to do everything with a down pick, so you can start with that just until you get the left hand memorized. However, if I try and keep that constant down picking going for the whole riff at the actual speed of the song, it's going to get really erratic and kind of crazy and out of control. Like, it just looks manic and it's not very comfortable and not very efficient. So I really would suggest with this one that you try and get your alternate picking down. I've got a lesson entirely about alternate picking, so I'll pop a link to that in the cards. But this is a really good one to get used to practicing that, because it's all eighth notes. So as you hear in the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, you can synchronize your down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up picking. So it's just going to be down, up constantly. And of course, the other thing this forces you to practice is moving on to different strings while keeping the alternate picking going. So when you move on to the C chord part of the riff, you've got to move on to the top 2 strings. And then you're back to G string for the start of that G chord part. So I think even though it gives you a little bit more to think about because you're not just doing all down picks, because it's more efficient, it's going to be easier for you to speed up in the long run. You're going to find there's less movement in the right hand, and it's just going to be a good synchronization exercise and good for your general development as a player. So that would be my recommendation when it comes to picking. So in terms of putting this all together on a looper pedal, you want to start by recording your bass line into the looper, but the tricky part of this is going to be leaving the right length of gap at the end of the bass line so that it starts again on beat 1 of the next bar. Now, one way you can deal with this is by counting the 2, 3, 4 of the end of the bar that you're playing, so that when you click the pedal on beat 1 of the next bar, the bass line starts again in the right place. So just to give you a demonstration of that, I'm going to put the bass line into my looper. So 2, 3, 4, click. And that's going to make sure that the bass line leaves the right length of gap in between the 2 parts and starts again on beat 1. I'm then going to lose my octave, put my distortion on, and then I can play the melody over the top. 2, 3, 4. Two, 3, 4. So that's one way you could get started with it. If you find that you're really struggling with leaving the right length of gap at the end of the part, you could actually do percussive strums on beats 2, 3 and 4 of that bar. So just to give you an example of that, that would sound like this. might just help fill the gap so you know exactly when you're going to be coming in. So now I can use that to guide me at the start. 2, 3, 4. So there's a couple of approaches you can take to start getting everything synced up on your looper pedal. As I say, you can use the percussive hits as a guide if you're really struggling to get the timing of that gap right. But I think in the long run, you want to get used to either just doing the counting yourself or ultimately not having to count at all and just feeling when the start of the next bar comes in and kind of developing a sixth sense for when to hit that looper pedal without having to necessarily count it out loud. But there's a couple of approaches you can take. Hopefully you get it all synced up. I think if you play along to the original track as well, that kind of gets you used to the feel of it. So maybe try playing along to the original track a few times first, then putting it on your looper and trying to get it down yourself. I think those are good skills to develop as a musician. So there you have another couple of riffs to start working on. Pretty cool song this one, and a little bit more technically challenging than the previous songs in this series, but it's good to push yourself to overcome them challenges in order to develop on the instrument. Remember, you can find more songs and riffs like this one in the Series 4 playlist in the description, and anything that you're unsure about you can brush up on in the previous series of my beginner course, which is all on my YouTube channel. And on that note, feel free to subscribe if you'd like to follow along with the lessons, and I'd also really appreciate you giving the video a like if you found the video helpful. So this is going to be the last video of this series that I upload for now, but the likelihood is that I'll come back and add more songs when I come across tracks that are appropriate for this level. But in the next series, we're going to be looking at power chords, which I think is a good and appropriate step for where you're at as a guitar player at this stage. So hopefully I'll see you in those lessons as well.